welcome everyone. I'm Kerry from ROWAN CONNECT, and it's a real pleasure to introduce you to two iconic figures from the world of Rowan. Today we're joined by Stephen Sheard, who co-founded Rowan with Simon Cockin in 1978, and the renowned artist and designer Kaffe Fassett, who began working with Stephen in the early 1980s. Together, they emphasised the importance of creating yarn shades that could be translated into beautiful and timeless design. And this is a vision that remains very much at the heart of what we do at Rowan every day. Stephen and Kaffe, thank you for being with us. The stage is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Kerry.
So, here we are.
Here we are, Kaffe. Yeah. Yet again, 40? Blimey, more than 40 years later, 40, yes, 45 years later, nearly. Goodness me. Yeah. So we're still thriving, we're still smiling, you're still working every day. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what occurs to me, it's just thinking that when we first started all this adventure, how reluctant people were to accept our vision of, you know, beautiful patterns and wonderful colors in knitting. And we're sort of back to that now, you know, where knitters are quite nervous of working with color. A lot of them. I mean, I still find people coming to my workshops for patchwork with amazing shawls or beautiful sweaters or jackets that they've made. And so I know that there are some beautiful knitters out there in the world, but there's a lot of very frightened ones now to work. They think it's very complicated to work with color, which is a bit sad.
Yes, after all those decades, of course, though we're probably working with a new generation of people now, but
yeah,
in those early days, it was very much the big spinners, and they controlled the wool shops. And it was very, very hard for us to get in as a new boy on the block.
Yeah.
And in fact, we'll come on to it shortly, but I mean, that's why we had to do the knit kits, because we couldn't get our yarns onto the shelves. So the only way was to have a small investment and you sell knit kits to them, and little by little, bit by bit, we tried to raise the awareness. But I think what was fundamentally different in a way was because I had been a textile designer in industry, and so therefore I was always thinking of design. And then I mean, I think we'd only been going 3 or 4 weeks, and I came to see you at a lecture at Bretton Hall. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was at an art college.
Yeah.
And you were touring with 5 or 6 other textile artists. The only one I remember specifically was Roger Oates, because he was a weaver. Do you remember Roger Oates?
Yes, I do.
And he and his wife Faye Morgan were weaving beautiful rugs, and that's what we just started to do, because we're only a month old. But that was a real inspiration for me, because you stood out as just the sheer joy of working with color and design, in your Californian mellifluous voice. And I remember it had a big impression on me, and I think it was probably a couple of years later before we met again. But did you do a tour of the country with those lecturing? Can you remember?
Yeah, that was the Crafts Council. The most extraordinary thing that they did was to take several of us creators. I mean, there was, I think it was Candace Behuth and myself and several other people. You know, there was like a jeweler and a potter, and they sent us all around the country as a group and we would go into libraries and all sorts of places, and women's home industries and all kinds of things. And it was just fascinating to you know, to meet with people and have them astonished at knitting with color. I mean, it was extraordinary to me because I thought that what I was doing was so ordinary. I couldn't believe that it would raise an eyebrow with anybody. You know, it was doing what you would do with wonderful colors.
Mm.
But it turned out that it was a very big shock to
Yes, yeah.
people.
But it gave me some confidence and uplifted me because it's a tricky time. You're starting
Yeah.
a little craft business. You've given up your professional job, and you've got to live on nothing.
Yeah.
And there's you talking about the inspiration of it all. But it made me realize that as a designer myself, but okay, in textile weaving, very different to what you were doing with knitwear, that really designers like me, like you, whatever sort of designer, we could actually do things together. We could, and that I think was the relationship of doing things together, not having it as Paul Smith said. I remember in the 70s, him saying that the trouble with designers in the textile industry in Britain, they're put in a dark room and fed on carrots. And I just thought this was awful, because I'd worked for this Swede who had a designer actually running the company in Sweden for him, because that's what mattered: design, design, design. And so then to meet you and then others and start selling yarn to them, because I don't think you know, we'd originally sold yarn to weavers, craft weavers, but they didn't want to pay any money for nice yarns. Whereas you guys, what we called what Susie Menkes from the Times with that book, which I can't find a copy. I'm sure you've got a copy. Was it called The Knitting Revolution, wasn't it? In the very early 80s.
Yeah.
She really got things kick-started and got you all on the map, I felt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so interesting because I remember I went. The very first thing I knitted was a little. That got published was a knitting waistcoat for Vogue, and I did this thing in kind of Celtic designs, and I was using the Shetland yarns that I had found in Scotland, and I was so excited by it. And I took that to the people that were doing cashmere, and I said, I'd like to design for you with, your beautiful cashmere yarns. Would you be interested in having me work? And they said, oh, absolutely not. They said, we have our designers, and let me tell you something, young man from America. You're doing something that is not acceptable. The English do not want to look distinctive, and that was the message. It was like, don't dress us up. And I was thinking, oh gosh, you've got these beautiful, beautiful materials that America's never seen the like of. They're going to be astounded when they can see this beautiful palette of yarn. But what was so interesting is you were the first person to come along. I remember I met you at a fair. You were selling yarn. You remember you had white chenille, and I picked it up and I said, "This is beautiful, but do you have it in other colors?" And you said to me, "Well, would you like to design some colors for me?" And I said, if I did want to, would you listen to me? And you said yes, because I've heard you speak. And I was amazed.
All right.
Because nobody had said yes to me at all, and you said yes. I mean, coming to me. And do you remember I sat down with Steve Lovey and we put together 20 colors, I think, or something, or 10, maybe it was 10 colors, I can't remember. And you did them all. You got all of those dyed up.
Well,
and
they all worked together. That was the point. They worked as a collection, and it was great. But the story behind that white chenille was a very quirky, and in fact, they're still running. Briley Brothers of Huddersfield, they were cotton manufacturers, and they bought this pipe cleaner company, And in those days, you needed a wire with chenille to rod out your pipe.
Yeah.
And they came to me and said, do you have any use for this? And I said, well, not with wire in the middle, but if you can find a core, cotton chenille is something I'd like to see again, because all the chenille on the market was acrylic and not very nice. And my grandmother had a beautiful chenille tablecloth on that covered the scrub table. And we used to hide under it, and that was a beautiful chenille tablecloth. So that's how that started. It was a local Huddersfield company.
I didn't know that. That's a great story.
Right. Yeah. So, so just the first picture, Kerry, that I found of Kaffe, in fact, just about the time probably I met him. Here we are.
Yeah.
So there you are with
Sasha Kagan, and her boyfriend at that time, and Zoe Hunt, who worked for me, was the first person to come along who totally was able to cope with all of my color and pattern and make beautiful finished knitting. So she brought the expertise and the shapes into my world.
And were you selling, just to remind me, were you selling a few ready-mades that actually Zoe was doing, or did you work with those people called Women's Home Industries to do your sales of sweaters?
I did a bit, and then I also we would have the Hollywood crowd began to discover us, and so we were knitting for Lauren Bacall and people like that, and Barbara Streisand, and all sorts of extraordinary actors and actresses were coming over to commission knitting from us.
I remember you said, because I think I came to your studio just a few days after Barbara Streisand had arrived, and you said she was a very petite, elfin little lady sitting in your chair.
Yeah, I mean, the doorbell rang and I went down and she said, "Hello, I'm Barbara," and she just had this crinkled hair, and I looked at her and I thought, my God, is this the great Barbara Streisand, the great singer, the voice, And she came up into my studio and looked around, and she was there. She was directing Yentl, the film, and anyway, it's very interesting because I've just read her book, which is just wonderful. I recommend it to anybody who wants.
It's fabulous, Kaffe. Catherine bought it for my last birthday, so
have you read it?
Wonderful. Yes, yeah.
Isn't it wonderful?
Wonderful,
It's a great insight into how a woman deals in the world of creativity, but also how a creative person thinks about a film and how it's put together, and the script and that telling line at the end of a film. I mean, I'm brilliant.
Well, anyway, it's back to control of the creative process. That's what she strived for throughout her book and her life, and that's what you strive for, and what I strive for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. When I was told that the English don't want to look distinctive, and we went to all those publishers to get the book published, and nobody would listen to us. They wouldn't listen to us. The message we had, they'll say, we'll publish your book, but in our own way, which is some black and white photographs in the middle of a lot of instructions. And I said, that's not the vision I've got. It was very difficult getting that first book off the ground.
So we move on from you going around that Crafts Council lecture tour. And we'd moved after 12 months from an old cooperative building to a derelict mill. And very soon we were just, and here it is, we were just beginning with no money to renovate it. We had some wood-burning stoves in there.
Yeah.
And we were looking for a cover for and this was before our knitting magazines, our knitting books, before knitting book number 1. And you said, I'll paint you a cover. And there it is. There it is. It still looks beautiful. It's the mill's just down in the valley. It's now 10 apartments, and they've still got the Rowan sign, on the door. So that's very nice.
Well, that's nice. Yes.
Yeah. But that was in the depth of winter, I think, when you look as though you're actually your feet are in the River Ribble there.
Yes, absolutely. I like to get a strange angle.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like a filmmaker. You know.
Good. Yeah. So at that time, and this just shows it's not a very nice shot, as we later were much more creative with our photography, because this was an industrial photographer who did this. It's all we could afford. And this shows that yarn that you worked in a lot over the decades, the lightweight DK, and it was just to remind you, it was a Falkland Isles fiber. It was a pure Falkland Isles wool, and that had a lovely luster to it, which you said gave the colors a real shimmer.
Well, yeah, it did. But also you did a lot of colors in that. That's why I was choosing that.
Right,
because it had a palette
of 96 colors, and that was only because we a small dye house down in Huddersfield had gone out of business, and the dyer who we'd just started working with on these shades said, well, I'm out of a job. And we said, well, look, let's work together. Let's try and get 4 or 5 of small dyeing pans that you've been doing our shades on, and we'll give you plenty of work. I mean, the rest is history. He worked with us for 20 years, and he used to call himself Mammoth Dyeing, of course, which was just the joke because it was a very small dye house. But people didn't understand how we could get so many colors, and that was because we had this small craft dyer, and he was a master dyer. And I'd like to celebrate the dyers of the world because they're a backroom forgotten people. But he was brilliant.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree with you. To me, every time that I sit down and do needlepoint and I can match the color I'm working on, by endless hanks of yarn, I think, what a miracle that people can, don't have any kind of dye lot problems. They just make that consistent color. Yeah. And all of those hundreds and hundreds of colors that go into a range.
Yeah.
From needlepoint.
Yeah, that's right. So we went on to call this a paint box range, which particularly our biggest customer, John Lewis Partnership, said that was a really nice name to call them. So just moving on, Kerry, to the first knit kits that we did with Kaffe. So this was using the chenille that you'd coloured up for us.
Yeah.
I think this first range of tweeds here were not our colours. Do you remember that your partner, Richard Womersley, used to buy job lots from Samuel Lums for his, and he was weaving throws for Trisha Guild. In fact,
that's right.
That's Trisha Guild's daughter there, from Designers Guild.
That's right.
I don't know how you got her. Maybe Richard and you were down there and you said, Trisha, can we borrow your daughter? We can't afford it.
Steve Lovey, the photographer. He grabbed every face that was acceptable to him in the whole of London. He would take people off the tube and say, come and model for us if he saw something interesting.
So the next one I think shows so here you are. Now this, do you remember this Ikat? We sold this for years, Kaffe. It was so popular, the colouring that you did of not just the chenille and the yarn combination, but the design. And
because it was all knitted in one piece.
It was
at the cuff, and you knitted right across the jacket.
Yeah. That actually brings up another thing that we didn't talk about very much. That you were the king of the circular needles, and this was still a time when people mostly were working on normal knitting pins, weren't they?
Yeah. Well, when I somebody came and did an article on us for the New York Times, and when that article appeared, I got a letter from Elizabeth Zimmerman, the great English knitter who had moved to America,
Knitting Without Tears.
Yeah, Knitting Without Tears. That's right.
Right.
And she wrote to me and said, I've just read about you in the New York Times, and good luck to you. And go out and buy a circular needle. It will change your life. And it did change my life. Absolutely the most wonderful item.
So now we come on to where life changed certainly for me and our company, a struggling small business. This was another of your contacts. It was a lady called Mary Eddy from.
That's right. And I went to her and I said, I've got an idea for a cardigan. Can you feature this cardigan? And she said, yes, if you come up with a design, we'll feature it. So I came to you and I said, we need to be able to put a lot of colors into a cardigan, which is going to be featured in Woman and Home. I didn't know it was going to be on the cover, but anyway, it'll be featured in Women and Home. And can you help me we'll make a kit that we can use small amounts and larger amounts of yarn. And you said, yes, I'll put it all together. And so we did this. And the fantastic thing was, Woman and Home didn't take any money. They gave us all the money.
They did.
Extraordinary. I mean,
it was.
It put me on the map, and it put you.
Absolutely.
I mean, it was just fabulous.
It allowed us to do all the things that we're going to be talking about, particularly getting the magazine started, which was a very big, expensive production.
But hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kits had sold. I mean, it was that thing that if like 50 kits sold, they thought that was a huge runaway success.
Just to remind you, Kaffe, they said, probably about 600. And then they said, well, it's going to go on the front cover, which was the big surprise. Yeah. We're talking now March 1984. And then they said 10 days later, after the magazine had gone onto the streets, they said, oh, we got it wrong. We're going to sell 7,000. And I remember the shock for Simon and I. We just, well, how can we do that? And of course, we had to find more Falklands Isle wool and get the mill to spin through the night, and we had to get the dyer to, and so the whole thing. But we managed to deliver those 7,000 kits on time. Yeah. It was extraordinary.
And what I remember, Stephen, was going into a big supermarket and seeing a little old lady pushing a cart with that jacket on. Everywhere, I've seen this jacket popping up. It was just amazing.
And so very quickly, in fact, I see it's September, October the same year, they said, well, can we do a winter jacket? And then you designed the kaleidoscope, which was out of the wools we've been talking about, largely. And again, we did, that was the one time in history with 7,000. I think we sold 2,500 of that second kit. Right. So it's still really, really good. Yeah. I think we went on we used that model again on the right with ginger hair. Do you remember? Yes.
She was gorgeous. Yeah.
She was. Yes, she was. So with that start and our kits, we were able to invest in more kits, and we then get on to the big breakthrough for you, and that is Glorious Knitting. Yeah. 1985.
Yeah. And now, what's interesting about that was at that time, the yarn company that really interested me was in New York. And I've forgotten the name of them. Do you remember the name of that company? Anyway, it was a big company, and I phoned them up and I said, I'm about to produce a very interesting book on knitting, and I would like to use your yarns and other people's yarns in this book. Would you give me sample yarns? And they said, we've never heard of you. We don't know what you're talking about, and we're not interested. and they just slammed down the phone. And I thought, my God, I couldn't believe it. And so I came to you and I said, you know, I've had this terrible experience of people. I was going to use about 4 different spinners to produce the yarn for the book, but I'm going to go with all Rowan because you were the only person in this world that understood me and valued what I had to say.
Thanks for that. But of course, as we were just before that, there'd been a year of not quite depression for you, but I mean, and also I was a bit despondent because we couldn't get a publisher to publish it. Yeah. We went, I've got this memory of walking up 4 stories in Bloomsbury Square to this Dickensian Victorian publisher. I can't even remember the name, fortunately. And we just knew as we went in that this was never going to happen. And of course, it didn't. And you came out and said, nobody's ever going to publish my book. We're never going to get anybody. And I can't remember. We went to 2 or 3 others, and I cannot remember how we ended up with those 4 women above that strip joint in Soho, in Greek Street. How we met. Maybe you'd heard about Gail Roebuck.
And what I remember, I said to her, we've got this idea for this book. And she said, oh, yes, okay. When do you want to publish it? And I said, you're going to listen to us? And she said, yes. Well, I was warned that you were coming and to take you seriously. And I thought, my God, at last somebody's listening to us.
But it was also a big challenge for them, even for those 4 open-minded young women getting their Century publishing company up and running from that room. It was a big challenge for them to try and cope with Steve Lovey. He wasn't demanding. Yeah.
Boy, he was tough. he said at one point, he said, I know you're all gangsters, you publishers. And he said, but we want 25,000 pounds down. And they had never heard of anything like that for a knitting. I mean, if it was a runaway best-selling novel or something, perhaps, but or the memoirs of a great actress or something. But anyway, it was the great thing is they gave it to us, and off we went to Malta to photograph. And Steve absolutely rose to it and was brilliant.
So I've picked 3 of my favorite shots. This first one here with the amaryllis. Did you go to Holland or to shoot?
Yes. Well, yes. We had the most extraordinary thing in Holland because we went there and we went to the Keukenhof Gardens and we said, we're looking for color because I had asked this artist friend of mine to find us colorful locations, and everything he found us was black and white. I mean, there wasn't one speck of color in any of the locations he found us. And so we went to the Keukenhof Gardens, and there were, millions of fields of tulips and all this wonderful color. So we said, can we photograph in the gardens? And they said, absolutely. Yeah. When would you like to do it? And we said, we're coming on Monday. And this was on Friday. And so we went home and we found models, and we came back on Monday, and they had cut every tulip in the garden down on the weekend. and we said, I can't believe it. We're not going to photograph black earth. And they said, well, I said, what have you done with those tulips? And they said, we've got them in a dumpster in the back of the property. And so we went and photographed the girls lying against piles of dead tulips. But this was the one place we found this one guy that had some flowers in part of the garden.
But why it's one of my favorite shots is because it was so revolutionary. Nobody had ever shot knitwear in the hand knitting world like this before. With blending the backgrounds, the color, the exterior shots. Kerry, just show the next one, the Jack's Back, which is, look at what Steve found there. That those autumn maples absolutely reflect that wonderful Jack's Back. And of course, we did 18 of those designs from your book out of 30. We did 18 kits, and this was one of them, which went very well.
Yeah.
It just looks beautiful. And then one of my favorites, and I've had this sweater for the last 40 years, the cross patch. I mean, that's out of Samuel Lum's their fine tweed that they did in so many gorgeous colors. I think you colored some up for yourself, and some were their colors. But
and I mean, and I love, in those days, I was just into that very natural.
Yeah.
As well as my bright colors. This was to try to get that kind of tweedy look, into this palette.
Yeah. And then the next shot is the American cover, because they called your book over there Glorious Knits. But I seem to remember they printed even more for the American front cover edition. Again, was it 25 or 30,000 copies for America, which was unheard of for a book that was
absolutely unheard
of. $20, yeah.
And it sold out before Christmas.
Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting about this shot that was on the cover of the yellow star jacket was that this was in Malta, and just before we took the shot, the model leaned over and picked a geranium out of the sewer that was running by in this old alleyway, and she just stuck it in her hat, and it was just the perfect color, just picking up on the color around that star, that rose.
Yeah. And then you did the star, and obviously the jacket, the coat there, and other colorways. Do you know that guy there, was he your assistant photographer? He became a famous photographer, I think. It was called McPherson.
So.
Yeah.
Now that was Steve Lovey's assistant.
Yeah, in those days. Absolutely beautiful, stunning shots, which
and she became a very famous model too. I mean,
really?
I can't remember her name now.
Yeah.
But she went on to do a lot of modeling. That was her first job.
All right. The next shot, Kerry, now this shows why I wanted that. It isn't necessarily my best shot that I love from the book, but it's a superb shot of tumbling blocks, which of course was to play an enormous part in the history of Rowan much later. I think this may have been the first showing to the world public of tumbling blocks, and we'll talk about.
It was the first time I knitted it, and when I realized what a wonderful pattern it is to knit. I mean, you don't knit, Stephen, but if you're sitting down and you have 18 stitches across the middle of the block, the top of the block, and then one light and one dark, and then you just expand in both directions with the light and the dark, and you create this box, and it's the most magical thing to knit. I love it.
And you've done it many times. I
do it over and over and over.
Yeah. In fact, I'm wearing that now on this. This jacket.
I noticed. Yeah. I love that dark colorway.
Yeah. So we then move on to. Forgive me, I've got a bit of a croaky chest a couple of days ago. We then move on to the number one book. That was the cover, if you can get that, Kerry. That was the cover of number one.
Right.
And that's where we started to use the money that we'd got from the super triangles.
Yeah.
And then we featured this lovely design of yours, the icon jacket and in the men and women.
Yeah.
In our number one book, which again, there we go with those tweeds again, which you really loved working with. We expanded, and that's in the chunky, of course. There was less central heating around in those days. I mean, people were wearing thicker knitwear, weren't they? The following year, we moved on to the number two book with this beautiful Midnight Carnation.
Yeah.
I think we've got a shot there of it, Kerry. Yeah. And then you also did this banded triangles, which was also in the number 2 magazine. Number 2 magazine was the English Country Story, and that came because it was my first time in America. You had fixed us up with a distributor because, again, a bit like your publishing experience, nobody in America wanted to work with Rowan because it's what did they say? It's too fine and it's too complicated. The Americans won't have it. And so
I mean, that was amazing that you broke into the American market, because it was a very closed shop, I would have thought.
Yeah, but your book was the spearhead that got us at least none of the big spinners wanted to work with us, but this Englishman who'd moved to America, gone into computers, made some money, and then he worked with the British Crafts Council that you mentioned earlier, Kenneth Bridgewater, and you put me onto him. And he wasn't doing knitting yarns, he just had this lovely gallery in Boston.
Yeah.
Down Newbury Street, was it? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it was very high-end, very expensive crafts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said to me, look, he ran this fashion show. He bought a lot of my garments as ready-mades, and he only sold half of them, but he's kept them because he believes in me. So give him a go. And so basically we did. And so my first trip to America, this next shot is, there we go. Now, have you seen that for 40 years, Kaffe? I've managed.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So basically, I'd gone down in New York to meet Kenneth, and I'd gone to Ralph Lauren's Friedlander mansion. He bought this mansion down Madison Avenue off an old lady, and he turned it into the house into a shop. And he was doing the English story. And I thought, well, hang on, we're English. Why is he doing our story? So this was our way of expressing that.
Well, it's sure. I mean, I look like, I don't know, a character out of a novel.
I can't believe where we'd found any jodhpurs that were big enough for you. And those boots.
I know. I can't remember wearing those boots and everything. It's extraordinary.
And on the left-hand side there is the very talented young designer, Annabelle Fox.
Yes.
Who's modeling. And then the other people are more actors than models. And then there's my friend Celia sitting down there. And she's a quintessentially English country lady with her pearls in her. So,
she's the real deal.
She's the real deal, yeah. Yeah, she lived just across the field from us for the last 40 years. Anyway, so this magazine really got us moving and telling stories. That was the point. So what's the next one, Kerry? Oh, yeah. So because of your book, Century then asked me, would you do a book of all the best designer knitters? And so there were 20 of them out of about 300 that we were supplying yarns for their knitwear businesses. And so we put this book together. The front cover happens to feature Martin Kidman, who was the design director for Joseph.
Right.
And famously, Joseph bought all Martin's collection from Central St. Martin's, and then sold it and had it knitted. So you did actually an iconic garment. Have we got the next one up, Kerry?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So this was the large block coat, and it's a lot of knitting, but it went very well indeed. Again, more or less all in chunky tweed there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, I invented that on a flight to America or on the way back. I was just sitting there playing with a little bag of yarn, and I put together these squares of knitting, and I thought, that's a nice idea. And so when I got home, I cast on for the coat and knitted this big version of it.
Yeah.
And again, all in one piece. Those coats.
Yeah. I remember people telling me the weight on the needles of doing the row across.
Yes.
Across. Yeah.
That's why you need circular needles.
Yeah, and you call that Windows coat. That's right. Yeah. So we then move on to our relationship with UK and Liberties. We opened our first concession, the Rowan concession in Liberties, in 1987, and that went on for 35 years. Right. And they asked us, would we do some books with their fabrics, with our knitwear, and your designs? So the one on the left, actually, the Foolish Virgins. Yeah. The one on the right, the cotton version, the next season, because we loved it so much. Not an easy knit, Kaffe.
No, but a lot of people did it.
They did.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
You know, one knitter said to me, "Why couldn't you have called it the Wise Virgins?"
Well, but by one of
I took an idea off an old Norwegian tapestry.
Well, one of life's amazing coincidences. After 46 years, we're moving from our house up here in the hills to York, where Beth's an art teacher, and she has a baby, age 40. So I haven't told you that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've seen the baby. Yes.
Oh, you have. Oh, she sent
you
you
a picture.
Yeah, great. Anyway, look, we're clearing out the house, and I came across this photograph. Can we get it on the? Yeah, and this is the postcard that you got from Oslo, from the Kunstindustri Museum, and it's called "The Wise and the Foolish Virgins."
Right.
Yeah.
I like foolish better.
Yes, that's what you called it. Yeah. Okay. So we had lots of good times in Liberties because they really worked with us. You did lots of presentations there and evenings. It was a great relationship, and it perfectly suited.
Well, it's a wonderful task, isn't it, to have a beautiful fabric and then to get the mood of that into a piece of knitting. That's what I did for Bill Gibb when I first designing knitwear for him.
Yeah.
You know, I was looking at the patterns that he's putting into his clothes.
So this magazine number 4, where you did some really beautiful designs, of which one of my favorites is the red diamonds here. This was a story of farmers in Suffolk, and they were gathering the straw for thatching, and and we used a couple of actors rather than models, just beautiful.
Yeah,
that was a very popular design. And the next one,
I love the idea of farmers wearing designer knitwear.
Yes. And here they are gathering wood with the chunky version of the tumbling blocks.
That's right.
And the split diamonds.
Yeah.
So that story went down very well. That was magazine number 4. And then you've been going on and on at me. The next shot, you've been going on and on at me about, well, can't I do my own magazine? And so we did this Kaffe Colour book.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a wonderful shot of you sitting with the icon sweater, and there we've got the throw, the box throw.
And you know what's interesting about that shot is that throw is on the needles. It's only half knitted, and so we were hiding the part that wasn't finished, and I'm pretending that I'm sitting on a whole bedspread.
I didn't know that, but our friend and colleague Kenneth Bridgewater, the American distributor, his wife June, who of course came from Belfast. Yeah. She was a great knitter, and she has been knitting that throw for the last 20 years. And every time I go visit them, the last time was 2019. She was just nearly finished it, by the way. She's not given up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And I think then there was this other shot here, which we used for your publicity shots for quite a lot, with the throw in the background with the star sweater. Great shot.
Good finding all these photographs.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, I've really enjoyed going down through my personal archives. Yes,
Yeah.
loved
The
it.
Islamic star sweater. Now I love looking at Islamic designs for knitting and
Yeah,
cards.
great. Is there one more on that Cave's Color book, Kerry? Yes, yes, yes. That's a lovely shot.
A beautiful shot.
Yeah, I think that I managed to convince you that Tony Bowes would do a good job. Oh yes, because he'd. I know some of the photographers we used, they never really were able to capture your knitwear as well as you wanted. But Tony Bowes, you really liked.
But you see, I styled that shot. I found that doorway, and you know, and got those wonderful colored bricks and that beautiful plum color on the woodwork.
Yeah,
to go with the knitted ideas.
Yeah, and I think that's the same model that we used earlier. Well, the woman at home used. Yeah. Got the next shot, Kerry. Yeah, so this is 1989 we've got to now, and this is us opening the first Rowan outlet in Oxford. We had these great stockists, Phil there on the left and Marlene, and they said, can we open a Rowan shop? So that's what we did. And you came and gave a talk.
Right.
And that's 1989. And that shop, I think, was there for 12 years or in the centre of Oxford. Very, very popular.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we move on to one of my favourite books, actually, Kate. You and Zoe doing the family album. And I think this is really was Steve Lovey at his best, getting your beautiful knitwear. Yeah. And I think you shot all this all in America, didn't you?
No. Part of it was in Morocco. We took a trip down through Morocco. And you know, we had a lot of little Moroccan children, and I mean, it was finding families everywhere. This guy was from Canada.
Yeah. I mean, look at that. I mean, that's just that diagonal stripe, the bright squares, and the split. Yeah. That's you've used that so many times. I've seen that in cushions. Yeah. I've seen people copying it as rugs. It's just beautiful, really, really beautiful design. Yeah. In the lightweight DK, I think it was. And there you are with, and maybe this was this in Morocco? These
this was in Morocco, in a field of wildflowers.
Yeah.
Little Moroccan children.
Yeah. And they were so popular. I remember we did a shot with my own daughter Beth. She was about that age at the time, and we did quite a few kits from it. It was just wonderful working on that. And Steve, well, his photography is just outstanding.
Well, you know what was wonderful about that book was that Zoe was able to design and knit up these things. And this was the first time that she had actually taken an active part in the design. Yeah. She said to me when we were in Japan together, she said, I got an idea for a children's book, but I'm not sure. I need to do it with you. Yeah. And so we did it together, and it was a wonderful book, I thought. It
was great, and it went very well. It did. Yeah. The next shot is probably the most iconic shot of all in terms of your design, the garment, our story of Swallows and Amazons. And we didn't know at the time, of course, because we hired a 16-year-old model called Kate Moss, and wow, the rest is history. Yeah. And that Killam jacket, you don't remember this, Kate, but I tried for years to get that jacket. He said, no, I have sold it to Louis of Boston, and this selling for $2,500. I can't let you have it as a knitting pattern. And every year, you don't remember this, I would say, can we have the knitting pattern for the Killam jacket? No. And then finally you gave in.
Yeah. And here it's knit, you know, worn by the most famous model in the world. What's interesting about that was, you know, I looked at the book Swallows and Amazons, and I saw all these different models, you know, modeling these clothes, and I thought, yeah, well, there's another group of interesting models. They're okay, but Steve Lovey took one look at that book and he said, "Who is that?" And he
Really?
pointed to Kate's face and he said, "That is a face."
Wow.
And he
Wow.
saw it right away. And then,
Wow.
she went on to become the most famous model we've ever known.
I remember going back to the same agency where we'd paid £400 for her for a daily rate.
Yeah.
And she was £10,000 a day.
Yeah.
2 years later. So, of course, that's not our world. The next shot, Kerry, is, there we are again. Great designs you did for this Swans and Amazon story, Kate. There's Kate Moss on the left, and then the other, and I think that guy with the glasses, he's the assistant photographer as well. And that beautiful squares design there. Wow, those colours, brilliant. Okay, so moving on to, I didn't know I had this. This was a Glorious Colour tour, and I've forgotten all about it, but we actually toured you around Britain using our sales manager, John Webb, as a roadie. And you went all around the country. I remember in Bradford, you got 1,200 people in St. George's Hall. And it was astounding, wasn't it?
It was astounding because I was on television at that time. And so that's what drew the crowds.
Yeah. So do tell me that this was a commission, this vase, this needlepoint vase that you'd hand stitched.
Yeah.
Was it for someone we know or someone famous, or can you remember? Or
no, I think that one is I've still got.
Right.
Or I mean, I did sell one to somebody, but I think this one I still got. So that when we have my big retrospective one of these days, we'll sit down and bring that one out again.
It's worth mentioning about this time you did this tour, which lasted a few months. It wasn't quite every night, but I mean, I just remember it was very hectic. It was really good. But then a new director of the V&A, the Victoria and Albert Museum, a lady called Elizabeth S. Steve Cole, who sadly has died just a month ago. She wanted to have an exhibition of you as the only living thing, the person they'd done, just filming in the background.
The first living textile artist to have a one-man show at the V&A. And they put up signs. You remember those enamel signs all around the museum pointing, the RSC signs pointing toward. That's when I knew I had absolutely made it. When I saw my name on public signs toward the V&A.
So I think you owe Elizabeth Esteve Cole quite a lot, because in her the obituary about her, it was basically how she fought against the curators who didn't want something so populist, but she said, no, we are going to make this place popular.
Yes.
And Kaffe Fassett will do it. And of course you did. You got 150,000 people to come and see it. And it was a great success, and it helped her reputation.
It was the second best-selling show, and the first best-selling show was Elton John's wardrobe.
And so that we then went on to tour this around the world. Do you remember my PR, Shirley Barnett? She set up the World Touring Exhibition, and we toured it to 17 countries, and that lasted the next 2 or 3 years at least, all over the world. It was wonderful, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was extraordinary.
Yeah. Great. So just moving on, we don't have much time left, but I've just picked a few shots I like from later magazines. This is a timeless floating circles of yours you've done so many times. This is a beautiful version. And here we have a young Brandon Mabley doing probably this rag flower. I think this is one of the first times we worked with Brandon in our knitting books. Really.
When you think how extraordinary it is that Brandon came to me with no art education, with no experience at all, and learned how to knit and needlepoint and paint, and started designing, the most amazing knitwear and teaching knitwear all over the world. No, it's a lovely story. So next we move on to this is the
I think, one of the most iconic shots, because basically this is Liza, our colleague. You are still working with her, and really she's the lady who said, she's the only person who could speak to you in tones of, what do you mean, Fassett, that quilting's an old lady's hobby? It's not.
That's right.
I gave you a quilt to inspire you for tumbling blocks, and so get on with it. This is the way forward. Knitting's, at the time, knitting was really going downhill fast, and so we worked with you with those shot cottons you'd done for Oxfam in India. Do you remember?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That all started with the hand woven fabrics from India, the stripes and the shot cottons. Yeah.
And I think that Liza's got that in her house. She bought that painting, didn't she?
That's right. She bought that painting. When she bought that painting, I said, if you were able to find that on the market and buy it, that means we should work together. And that's the omen that I need to come and work, because that was a patchwork quilt. And so I thought that really says that I should work with her. And we've had this amazing career doing fabrics and so forth, and quilts and books ever since.
Great. The next shot is showing these the stripes at a time when people were not knitting, the late 90s, before we got into quilting, and before knitting resurrected itself, which is a whole other story, really.
Right.
But you ended up doing some beautiful classic stripes, and I think you enjoyed it. To begin with, you didn't, but I think as time went by, you really ended up doing some great designs.
Well, I love the Kid Silk Haze, because look what it does. It takes those stripes and kind of melts them together in the most beautiful way. That's the most beautiful yarn.
Good.
And now it has over 100 colors. And I've just done some new colors for the range.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So that's very exciting.
So next we've got, I put this in because it's just such a beautiful composition of your design, your colors. And the book, the layout, the model, it's just beautiful. And in fact, my neighbor says she's actually knitted this dress. So,
well, I was going to say that's the kind of knit that doesn't terrify a knitter. It's a little Fair Isle knit that's very simple, and you just repeat in different colors.
Yeah. So the next shot is when Tricia Malcolm, who of course is head of sales for Rowan now, when she was a publisher in New York for knitting, Vogue Knitting and Soho Publishing. I think this was Brandon's first book, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
And photographed in New York.
Yeah.
God, what a beautiful thing. It's so nice to have that and remember his first foray, when he was really coming out as an incredible designer and knitter.
And I just think it's great, and it's meant to be that Tricia was always a great fan of yours and of Rowan, and now she's running Rowan sales around the world in America. Yeah, great. So next shot, I don't want to embarrass you, but this is honorary doctorate of textiles and design, Kaffe Fassett in 2016 at my alma mater, Huddersfield University.
Yeah. And you can, I'm having quite a laugh at that.
Yes. But you had a great day. I remember you were doing this guerrilla knitting out on the bridge and working with the students. Yeah, good. And then finally, we have 2017, the 40th anniversary. I think you've just come from the Palace. Remind me, I'm sure when you came for you and Brandon, he had a bowler hat on, and you've been to the Palace for your MBE. Is that right?
Yeah. When I got my MBE.
Yes, as an American. Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. Great. Well, that's a lot. I think we're out of time, actually. Kerry, have we got time for questions? Or
I don't think we do.
No. I can't believe an hour's gone by. It's been such fun, Kate.
Oh, it was really fun, Stephen. You were fabulous. I can't believe how much you remember. You remember the names of all the sweaters.
It's been fantastic for us to sit and listen to this, a real treat. And we will definitely extend the session by a few minutes and just ask a few questions, if that's all right, if you've both got time. The first thing to mention is that Liza is watching.
Really?
Oh, how wonderful.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So she has commented in the chat to jog your memory, Kaffe, because you were talking about a yarn company in New York that you really liked and you couldn't quite bring the name to mind. And she says it is Thacky Company.
Yeah, Taki. Yeah.
Thacky.
Taki yarn.
Yes, remember?
Diane, yes.
They were quite wonderful, strange colors, but awful people.
Well, their loss was our gain.
That's right. Exactly.
So there are a few people that have commented that Glorious Knitting or another book or a pattern changed their entire approach to knitting. So Carol Holland has said, I bought the Turkish carnation kit from Liberties in, she thinks, the 80s. She thought it was magical, and it changed her entire approach to knitting. Joanna Fowl, not sure how I pronounce that, forgive me, Joanna, says, thank goodness Stephen and Kaffe met and kept going. They revolutionised my knitting and joy of colour. Fantastic interview. Lovely to meet Stephen at last as well. So she's obviously not ever met you yet, Stephen, so that's good.
That's nice.
Yes, so Jill Moyle has a question. She says, I can remember a TV series with Kaffe that inspired me to pick up my needles again. Can Kaffe remember when that was, or what TV series that was?
It was 1985 or 6. It was after Glorious Knitting had come out, and before we were doing some other books. But yeah, that was for Channel 4, and it was called Glorious Color.
And it was a lovely lady called Anne James, wasn't it?
That's right. Anne James produced it.
Yeah.
Okay. And Kath Adams is asking, did the colour and sunlight of growing up in Big Sur influence Kaffe's love of clean, clear colour?
Perhaps it's hard to tell. I mean, I think more than that would be the early influences of going into Chinatown in San Francisco and seeing beautiful Chinese paintings with beautiful pastel colors and so forth that they used. That had a lot to do with my color development.
Interesting. Okay, well, let's close the session with this final comment, because I think we're all feeling the same. Evelyn says, this has been totally amazing. Completely agree. I could listen to you both all day. Thank you so much for your time. It's exactly what you said. So thank you. It's been really wonderful. Really appreciate the fact that you've spent your Sunday lunchtimes with us, and you've shared all that sort of insider behind the scenes type of experience and history, and it's really fascinating for us. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and thank you everybody for joining us. I hope you loved it.
Thank you.